They were only married for a few days. The trail was narrow. The wind was strong. Kevin stopped at the cliff edge to take one last photo. Linda was standing right behind him. Moments later, Kevin Turner was dead. There were no witnesses, no signs of a struggle. Just one woman, one phone call, and a fall everyone called an accident. But accidents don't leave this many questions. Linda Hartley believed in second chances. Not for redemption, but for refinement. She learned that lesson the hard way during the 6 years she spent behind the concrete walls of the Ohio Correctional Facility for Women. Officially, she was sentenced to 8 years for fraud and embezzlement. Good behavior earned her parole. Cold calculation earned her survival. Linda never raised her voice. She never made threats. She never needed to. She watched, listened, adapted. Every gesture was measured, every smile rehearsed, every apology crafted with surgical precision. By the time she walked out of prison, she wasn't reformed. She was refined. She shed her past like an old skin and stepped into freedom with a single, unwavering truth. Linda Hartley would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. She crafted a dating app profile with precision, soft lighting, gentle smiles, a bio that suggested vulnerability without weakness. She wasn't looking for love. She was looking for opportunity. Swipe right. A match or a victim. Kevin's profile radiated sincerity. Weekend hikes, family dinners, a belief in finding the one. He was exactly the type who wanted to save someone, to be needed. He had loved too deeply before. At 19, he married his high school girlfriend. Too young, too hopeful. The marriage dissolved in 2016, leaving him cautious but lonely. Life had steadied since then. Kevin worked as a foreman at a car construction company, a job he took pride in. He was respected by his team, reliable, practical, the kind of man who showed up early and stayed late. His mother, Diane, always said, "Kevin's got hands that fix things and a heart that forgives too easily." His mother and sister Emily were his anchors. Emily nudged him toward dating apps. Kevin always resisted until one quiet evening when he sighed deeply and finally gave in to his sister's persistent nagging. He didn't expect much, but upon matching with Linda, he found her warmth. Her attention, her gentle way of listening drew him in faster than he expected. As their connection deepened, Kevin spoke about wanting a family. 2 kids, maybe 3. Linda couldn't think of anything worse, but she didn't flinch. "I've always wanted at least 2 children," she said softly. Kevin's face lit up, and just like that, he fell deeper. After a few positive dates, Kevin took Linda to his mother's house for dinner. He was nervous. He didn't bring people home lightly. Diane opened the door before he could knock. "There they are! Come in. Dinner's almost ready." Inside, the house smelled of roast chicken and freshly roasted potatoes. Emily said excitedly, "Linda, I've heard so much about you." She teased Kevin about smiling at his phone and always talking about Linda. Linda played it perfectly. A shy smile and a gentle squeeze of Kevin's arm. By dessert, it felt like she had always been part of the family. Linda moved with purpose. Every smile, every moment of softness was part of a carefully constructed rhythm. The next day, Emily caught up with Kevin. She said, "You looked so happy last night, Kev. Really happy. I haven't seen you like that for years." Kevin smiled softly. "I think she might be the one." Nearly a year passed. Kevin planned the proposal with trembling excitement. Linda said yes with perfect timing, a soft gasp, a hand to her chest, a tear that looked real enough. Kevin called his mother immediately. She said yes. He glanced at his smartwatch. Heart rate 110 beats per minute. "Mom, my heart's ready to burst. I'm so excited. I'm so happy." Linda smiled, already calculating the next phase. Kevin had always been responsible to a fault. A week after the proposal, he updated his life insurance policy, something he'd meant to do for years. He told Linda about it over dinner, smiling shyly as he explained it was just to make sure you're looked after, no matter what. Linda held his hand, thanked him softly, and played the part of the touched fiancé. Later that night, when Kevin had fallen asleep on the sofa, she reread the policy details with a quiet, calculating focus. $500,000. They would later say it was a tragic accident. A sudden gust of wind, a misstep near the edge, a fall no one could stop. But what no one knew was this. Linda had chosen this place long before Kevin ever booked the trip. The wedding itself was quiet, too quiet. Diane, Emily, and Emily's husband on the groom's chairs outside. No friends from Linda's side, no family, no past. Diane leaned toward Emily, her voice barely above a whisper. "Isn't it strange none of Linda's friends are here?" Emily nodded. "They're about to take their vows," she said. Diane fell silent, but the unease settled in her chest like a weight she couldn't explain. At the altar, Kevin looked completely in love, his shoulders relaxed, his eyes soft, every part of him open and hopeful. Linda played her role flawlessly, her smile warm, her gaze tender, her timing perfect. With a few spoken words and a kiss that looked perfect from every angle, they were married. The honeymoon destination was breathtaking. Jagged cliffs, rolling waves, a hiker's paradise. Kevin held her hand, talking excitedly about their future. Linda nodded, smiled, and listened, but her mind was elsewhere. Long before the trip, Linda had spent countless evenings scrolling through travel blogs and satellite images of the coastline, studying the trails, the drop-offs, the blind spots. She had chosen the location carefully, remote, windy, a place where accidents happened. The trail narrowed as they walked, each step bringing sharper gusts of wind and a clearer view of the violent drop below. Kevin moved ahead, stopping often to admire the waves crashing against the rocks. Just around a bend, roughly 200 yards from the safe lookout point, hidden from where anyone else could see them, Linda slowed her pace. When she finally stepped forward to join him, Kevin lifted his phone, focused entirely on the scenic views framed on his screen. There was a sudden yell that faded almost instantly. Time seemed to pause. Then came a sickening, distant thud. And then nothing. Silence. Linda did not scream. She did not run. She stood perfectly still, staring at the empty space where Kevin had been moments earlier. Her breathing was steady, her posture calm. As the wind howled around her, a quiet smile touched her lips. Not shock, not fear, satisfaction. Linda sat down on the rocky path and waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then more than 30. Finally, she stood, walked to the edge, and peered down. No movement, no sound, nothing. Only then did her breathing begin to shake. Only then did she reach for her phone. She dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Linda forced a gasp, stumbling backward from the cliff edge. Please help. My husband fell. We were walking near the trail. He was taking a photo and he slipped. I can't get to him. What's your name? Linda Hartley. Turner. Linda Turner. Okay, Linda. Can you confirm your location? About 200 yards from the safe lookout point. Help is on the way, ma'am. Is he conscious? No, he's not moving. Please hurry. Do not attempt to climb down. I tried. I couldn't find a safe foothold. Do not try again. Stay where you are. Linda nodded rapidly, her voice cracking perfectly on cue. Please, just get someone here. He fell so fast, I didn't even have time to grab him. She pressed the phone closer to her ear. Please, don't let him die. Try to stay calm, Linda. Help is on the way. The call ended. Linda lowered the phone and exhaled slowly. She was already rehearsing what she would say next. A man lies broken on the rocks below. His wife says it was an accident, but the cliffs, they say otherwise. When Detective Sam Hooper steps onto that wind-whipped trail, he knows one thing. The details don't lie. And today, those details will lead him into a story where grief might be real. But innocence? That's another matter. The 911 dispatcher logs the call. A fall from the cliffs. Possible fatality. She pushes it straight to police communications. 2 patrol units are assigned instantly. Fire and rescue are notified. The clock starts ticking. Patrol arrives first. Blue lights cutting through the coastal fog. They tape off the area, check the cliff edge, and confirm the worst. The fall wasn't survivable. One officer stays with Linda, wrapped in shock, voice trembling, hitting every emotional beat you'd expect from a grieving wife. But something in her calmness doesn't sit right. The patrol sergeant arrives next. He takes one look at the scene, steps back, and radios in. "Control, we've got a confirmed fatality. Circumstances unclear. Requesting a detective to attend." Detective Sam Hooper pulls up. As he does so, he murmurs to himself, "Accidents happen here all the time." Hooper ducks under the tape and asks the patrol officer, "What have we got?" "Male, mid-30s, Kevin Turner, looks like a fall." Hooper nods, but his eyes are already scanning the ground. The undisturbed gravel, the narrow trail, the edge where the earth hadn't crumbled. The scene is talking to him, and he's listening. "Where's the wife?" The officer nods toward a woman wrapped in a foil blanket. "Linda Turner says she was with him when he fell." Hooper takes a slow breath and walks toward her. Another fall, another tragedy, but his gut whispers otherwise, and Hooper has learned to trust that voice. Linda stands a few yards back, foil blanket, red eyes, shallow breaths, the perfect picture of a devastated wife. Almost too perfect. Hooper approaches gently. "Mrs. Turner, I'm Detective Sam Hooper. I'm very sorry for your loss." She nods. It doesn't feel real." "Tell me what led up to the fall." She explains the walk, Kevin stepping closer to the edge for a photo, the ground giving way. Hooper listens, but he's also looking. Her boots, too clean, no dirt, no scuffs, no sign she tried to climb down like she claimed. He files it away. "When did you call 911?" he asks. I think straight after. Everything happened so fast." Shock makes memories blur. That part is true, but something about her timing feels rehearsed. Hooper steps back. "Mrs. Turner, I'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to make a full statement." She nods quickly. "Of course." Hooper watches her. The grief is convincing, but the details aren't. Something here is wrong, very wrong. Hooper drives in silence. Linda's version of events loops in his mind. The clean boots, the shaky timing, the pieces that don't quite fit. He's not ready to call it a lie, but something is off. And now he has to deliver the worst news a parent can hear. This part of the job was never easy. He walks up the garden path of a quiet, well-kept house. Diane Turner opens the door, silver hair, warm eyes, already sensing the worst. He steps inside. The house is still, a faint smell of lavender. Photos everywhere. Kevin as a boy, Kevin with his sister Emily, Kevin smiling, laughing, having fun. Hooper sits next to her. "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Turner. There's been an accident. Your son, Kevin, fell from the coastal cliffs this morning. He didn't survive the fall." Her breath breaks. Her world collapses in a single moment. No, we were only at his wedding a few days ago." Hooper lets her cry. He gives her time. The clock on the mantel ticks softly in the background. Then, through tears, she asks, "Was Linda with him?" "Yes," said Hooper. Diane swallowed hard. "Are you absolutely sure it was an accident?" Hooper looks up, surprised, but not dismissive. "What makes you ask that?" She shakes her head. "I don't know. Something doesn't feel right." A mother's intuition. Not evidence, but rarely wrong. Hooper leaves the house with a new note in his pocket. Diane Turner, instinctive doubt. Follow up. He could feel the unease already tightening in his chest. Linda sat in interview room 2, hands folded neatly in her lap, the same foil-thin fragility she'd shown on the cliff. She repeated the same story she'd given the day before: the walk, the photo, the ground giving way, the panic. Not a single hesitation, word for word. It was too clean, too rehearsed. Hooper watched her from across the table, arms folded, jaw tight. Something in the rhythm of her answers bothered him. Not the content, but the precision. Like she'd practiced it. Like she'd had time to shape it. Hooper thanked her for coming in and led her out of the interview room. "I may need to speak to you again," Hooper said. His voice was calm but stern. Linda gave a pencil-thin smile. "Of course, you know where to find me." Back in his office, Hooper started digging. He typed in her name and date of birth. Linda Turner. Nothing. He tried again. Linda Hartley? The screen populated instantly. Hooper exhaled through his nose. Not surprise, not satisfaction, but confirmation. Ohio Correctional Facility for Women. Offense: financial fraud. Sentence: 8 years, served 6. Release date: 14 months ago. Parole: completed without incident. He leaned back, rubbing a thumb along the edge of his jaw. Financial fraud wasn't the kind of charge you stumbled into. It wasn't impulsive. It wasn't heat of the moment. It was deliberate, planned, calculated, just like her reactions on the cliff. Hooper clicked deeper into the file. Behavioral reports: spotless. Conflict incidents: none. Psych evaluations: cooperative, compliant, highly adaptive. That word stuck with him. Adaptive. He opened her employment history next. Sparse. A few short-term jobs. Gaps. Nothing that lasted more than a few months. Nothing that suggested roots. Then he checked her financials. Joint bank account opened with Kevin Turner 6 months ago. Savings: $18,000. Kevin's life insurance beneficiary updated 3 months ago. Policy amount: $500,000. Hooper let out a slow breath. There it was, not proof, but a shape, a pattern. He pulled up Kevin's file next. Clean, predictable, ordinary. A man who loved his family, worked steady hours, paid his bills, and didn't take risks. The kind of man who wouldn't see someone like Linda coming. Hooper closed the financials and opened the parole notes again. One line stood out. Subject demonstrates strong ability to present as emotionally stable and socially appropriate. He read it twice. Emotionally stable, socially appropriate, perfectly controlled, exactly what he'd seen on the cliff. Hooper sat forward, elbows on the desk, eyes narrowing as the pieces began to align. This wasn't just a background check. This was motive. This was opportunity. This was a woman who had reinvented herself with precision. And Kevin Turner had walked straight into the version of her she wanted him to see. Hooper reached for his notebook, flipping to a fresh page. He wrote one line at the top. Linda Turner, find the pattern. He tapped the pen against the paper again, slower this time. Next step was clear. He needed to talk to her again. The sympathy was gone. He saw her not as a grieving widow, but as a suspect. The coroner's lab smelled of disinfectant. Cold stainless steel surfaces waited in silence. Hooper signed for the preliminary report, thanked the technician, and carried the thin folder back to his desk. He didn't sit. He read it standing, one hand on the back of his chair. Cause of death: blunt force trauma from a fall. Secondary injuries: multiple fractures, internal bleeding, catastrophic cranial impact. Nothing unexpected there. The next section, however, was enlightening. Hooper read on. Notable findings: no defensive wounds, no grabbing at rock or vegetation, no soil or grit under the fingernails, no tearing on the clothing, no abrasions from sliding or tumbling. Impact pattern indicates a clean drop, not a slip, not a scramble. No attempt anyone could prove to reach him. No disturbed soil at the supposed slip site. No grit under his nails, suggesting he'd done nothing to attempt to stop his fall. Hooper exhaled slowly. A clean drop, no slippage, not a stumble, not a slide, not a last-second reach, just over. He turned to the final page. The coroner had cross-referenced the injuries with the smartwatch data. Estimated time of death, 11:26 a.m. The same moment Kevin's smartwatch stopped. Hooper paused to collect his thoughts. 11:26 a.m., the fall. Linda's 911 call came in at 12:04 p.m. A tightness pulled at Hooper's chest. Hooper closed the folder. Things weren't adding up. The timestamps, the clean boots, the undisturbed soil, the insurance, and now this. The shape wasn't a shape anymore. It was a line pointing straight at Linda Turner. It was time to interview Linda again. Time to overlay Hooper's findings with Linda's corroboration. Time for the truth to finally be revealed. By the time Linda Turner sat down for her follow-up interview, the case was no longer about what had happened. It was about whether the truth would finally be admitted. Interview room 3 was quiet, windowless, and deliberately plain. And this time, Linda was not there to grieve. She was there to explain herself. Linda sat at the table with her shoulders drawn in, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked smaller today, not fragile exactly, but diminished, controlled. Hooper entered with a soft knock carrying only a folder. No theatrics. "Linda," he said gently, taking the seat opposite her. "Thank you for coming back in. I know this is still very raw." Her eyes welled almost instantly. A tear slipped down her cheek. Hooper pushed the box of tissues towards her. "Take your time," he said softly. "We're not here to make anything harder." Linda dabbed her eyes, breathing shakily. I can't believe any of this is happening." Hooper nodded sympathetically, letting the silence settle before he continued. "Before we go any further," he said gently, "I want to remind you that this is a voluntary interview. You're free to leave at any time, and you're entitled to have a lawyer present if you want one." Linda shook her head quickly, almost offended by the idea. "No, I don't need a lawyer. I've got nothing to hide." Hooper offered a small, reassuring smile. "All right. That's absolutely fine. I just needed to make sure you knew your options." She relaxed again, just a fraction, and Hooper let her. "Let's go over the walk again," he said softly. "You and Kevin went past the main lookout?" "Yes," she whispered. "He wanted to see the view from further along." "And you were behind him?" "Just a few steps." "And the fall?" Linda steadied herself. "It all happened so quickly," she said. "He stepped to the edge to take a photo, and then the ground gave way." Hooper nodded sympathetically. "Do you mind if I take a quick look at your phone? Just to double-check the GPS data and call logs. Helps us map the timeline properly." She hesitated, a flicker, then handed Hooper the phone. "Of course." "Thank you," Hooper said, standing. "I'll have forensics take a quick look." He stepped outside and handed it to the forensic officer waiting in the hall. "Full extraction, GPS, browser history, recent activity." The officer nodded and disappeared down the corridor. Hooper returned to the room. "They'll only be a little while," he said. For several minutes, he kept things soft, gentle questions, reassurance, letting her believe he was off the mark, letting her settle. Then he shifted. "Linda, Kevin's smartwatch stopped recording at 11:26 a.m. That lines up with the fall." She nodded, eyes down. "And the 911 call came in at 12:04 p.m. A long pause. "I told you, I panicked," she whispered. "I didn't know what to do." Hooper's tone stayed calm, but firmer now. "I understand panic, but 38 minutes is a long time to be unsure," he continued, almost apologetically. "The coroner's report shows Kevin's injuries are consistent with a clean drop. No sliding, no scrambling, no defensive wounds, no soil under his nails." Linda's breath hitched. I told you it happened so fast." "And your boots," Hooper said, "were clean. No dirt, no grit, No sign you tried to climb down." "I did try," she snapped. "I told you." "And the soil at the scene," Hooper said, "was undisturbed. No displaced stones, no scuff marks." Before she could respond, there was a knock. The forensic officer stepped in and handed Hooper a printed sheet. Hooper placed it on the table and rotated it toward her. "Linda, earlier you told me you'd never been to that trail before." "That's right," she said quickly. "Kevin picked it." Hooper tapped the printout. "Your search history from the past week shows multiple queries for the exact area, including the cliff path, and the coordinates you gave the 911 operator were very precise." Linda froze. Hooper leaned in slightly. "Help me understand," he said softly, "because right now the evidence doesn't match the story." Her eyes filled again, but this time the tears weren't grief. They were calculating. I wasn't completely honest," she whispered. Hooper clicked his pen once. "Then let's start again." Linda stared at the printout on the table, her breathing shallow, her fingers tightening around the tissue she had been twisting for the past hour. Then something shifted. It was like watching a light switch flip. Subtle at first. Her shoulders straightened. Her eyes stopped darting and fixed on Hooper with a steady, unblinking calm. The trembling lips stilled. The fragile widow evaporated. The woman sitting across from him was no longer the grieving wife. She was the cold, calculating presence Hooper had suspected from the start. "Yes," she said, her voice suddenly flat. "I pushed him." And for a split second, it looked like she was smiling. Hooper didn't move. He let the words settle in the stale air of interview room 3. Linda leaned back in her chair, expression empty. "I have nothing more to say." Hooper nodded once, slowly. The transformation was complete, and she wasn't trying to hide it anymore. He stood. "Linda Turner," he said evenly, "I'm going to need you to stand up." She didn't resist. She rose calmly, almost mechanically, her hands at her sides. Hooper stepped behind her and removed his handcuffs. "I am arresting you for the murder of your husband, Kevin Turner." The cuffs closed around her wrists with a firm, practiced motion. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, an attorney will be appointed for you." He paused. "Do you understand these rights as I've explained them?" Linda stared straight ahead. Her face was a blank slate. Hooper opened the door and signaled down the corridor for transport officers. Only then did he step aside, guiding her out of the interview room. The interview was over. The case was no longer a theory. It was a charge. 8 months later, the courtroom felt cold in a way that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The trial had been swift. Linda Turner had entered a guilty plea without hesitation, offering no explanation, no apology, no emotion, just a flat admission of guilt. Now she stood before the bench, expression blank. Diane and Emily Turner sat in the front row of the gallery. Diane's hands trembled in her lap. Emily's jaw was clenched so tightly it looked painful. Judge Ramirez adjusted his glasses, looking down at Linda with a mixture of disbelief and controlled fury. "Mrs. Turner," he began, "this court has reviewed your plea, your criminal history, and the facts surrounding the murder of your husband, Kevin Turner." Linda didn't blink. "You were given a second chance in life. After serving time for a prior felony, you had the opportunity to rebuild. Instead, you chose to take another life." He leaned forward. "You planned this. You researched the location. You waited for an opportunity. And you pushed your husband to his death. You have shown no remorse, not once. Therefore, you are sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole." The words hit the room like a physical blow. Diane exhaled shakily. Emily closed her eyes, tears slipping free, relief mixed with grief. Linda didn't react. She simply bowed her head as the U.S. Marshals cuffed her and led her away. Justice had been done, and Linda Turner would never walk free again. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, but Diane and Emily slipped away through a side exit. Outside, the air felt different. "It's over," Emily whispered. Diane nodded. "She can't hurt anyone else now." Hooper approached quietly. "Your son deserved the truth," he said, "and you deserved answers." They stood together for a moment as the city moved on around them. "Kevin can rest now," Diane said. "He can," Hooper replied. The case file was closed. Justice had been served. As for Linda, this story ends where it began, behind bars. Kevin loved honestly. Linda loved precisely. The truth chose sides.